Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. A young botanist named Ellie has moved to a small desert town to study invasive plant species. We also see her looking at some flowers on the road. She returns home in her car and receives a voicemail from her sister asking how she is and where she was. At the end of the day, a man buries something in the ground and walks away. The next day, Ellie looks up a position on her GPS and heads there. She looks for some species of plants. Suddenly, a motorcyclist arrives and approaches to check that Ellie is alright. The young woman named Alex helps her by giving directions and asks to accompany her. Later, they document some blueprints and take notes. After finishing, they go back to the car and rest together. They enjoy their time together and plan to do it again another day, so Alex goes home. Ellie stays a little longer, and we see her feeling sad about something, holding a keychain that reminds her of her sister. Meanwhile, an unknown man fires flares in the open and waits. Ellie, ready to leave, witnesses a damaged aircraft crashing nearby. She quickly rushes to the scene to help. There she meets Tomas, a drug transporter. Frightened, she goes back to her car, but Tomas follows her, pulls out a gun and shoots her. Ellie tries to reverse the car but hits some rocks. Tomas catches up with her, instructs her to get out of the car. Fortunately, he doesn't know where she is, and knowing that Ellie offers help, so he leaves her alive to help him get out of that place. He says where he wants to go, which is the Salton Sea, and she tells him she can take him. So Tomas orders her to take the drugs from the plane, and fearing she will be killed, she starts to take them and store them in the trunk. He tells her to get in the car, and before Tomas gets in, Ellie hides a GPS along with a map, to buy her more time. They start the trip together, while the stranger, who was waiting for the plane, calls his boss to report the delay. Back in the car, Ellie proposes that once they reach their destination, Tomas puts the drugs in her bags and lets her go, ensuring her silence. Tomas, not fully understanding her, drives carelessly, hitting cacti and eventually hitting a pothole, beaching the car. Tomas assesses the situation and asks Ellie not to move. She finds a switchblade on the floor of the car and discreetly picks it up, hiding it in her sock. After checking the trunk, Tomas decides they will have to continue on foot. Ellie questions this decision as there are still 80 kilometers to go. Tomas doesn't care and forces her to carry one of the bags. Meanwhile, in his trailer, we see the unknown named Guillermo. In the morning in the arid desert of that region, Ellie and Tomas walk slowly. Guillermo, on the other hand, goes in search of the delivery. On a road in the region, we see Gomez, the sheriff of the town called Borrego Springs, who is repairing signs on the side of the road. Then he receives a call from his friend Jim, who talks about a body of a man that was found on the territorial border. As he is far from the site, Gomez asks them to solve it without him, as he is also working alone that week. Gomez asks about drug dealing in Jim's territory, but he says nothing has turned up. Back at Guillermo, he looks through his binoculars across the vast desert to see if he can find any clues to the drugs. Ellie asks to stop for a while and rest, as she was already tired. They drink water, and then when Tomas goes to relieve himself, Ellie takes the opportunity to try to get away from him. She runs and hides in some bushes. As he approaches, Ellie attacks him and tries to take his gun. But unfortunately, being weaker, she is dominated and again surrendered. Tomas then ties his hands with a rope and then continues the walk. Gomez, on his routine patrol, ends up seeing his daughter, who turns out to be Alex, who is going to school on a motorcycle but without a helmet, so he stops her and scolds her. At that moment, a colleague of his calls and talks about being looking for Ellie, the botanist in town who still hasn't come back with answers. A man named Carl was supposed to find her, but she didn't notify him of anything. Gomez says he hasn't seen her yet, but he'll be on the lookout. Alex confesses to his father that he saw Ellie in the desert the day before, as he had skipped school to go for a walk. She tells him where he last saw her and says that she will help him find her, but her father won't allow it. However, Alex insists and goes with his father to check the place where Ellie slept, but they can't find her and the receptionist says that she didn't see her return. Gomez then decides to go and check the place his daughter spoke about by himself. Meanwhile, Guillermo finds the fallen plane. He approaches it and checking it discovers that it is the transport of the product he was waiting for. Looking some more, he finds a bullet casing and also tracks of a car. Guillermo hurries and follows the clues. Back to Ellie and Tomas, he tired and with his injured leg ends up sitting on the ground. Ellie says that they will not reach their destination in the heat of the desert, and says that they need to go back to the city, but he does not accept it. She insists and says that if they go back she can get him a car and that way he could disappear without anyone knowing, this being the best option for both of them, because if they stay there, they will die. Tomas, however, says that they would be found by the owner of the drugs, but Ellie says that it is impossible for them to be found where they are, so she ends up convincing him. After that, Ellie helps him with the wound on his leg and then they continue on their way. Guillermo arrives at the place where the car is, and as expected he doesn't find anyone, but he sees drugs in the trunk. Suddenly two bikers arrive at the scene and approach Guillermo. They question about what happened and go to see it up close. And so that nothing is discovered, he ends up killing both men. Then find footprints on the ground and look in the direction they go. At that moment, the sheriff follows the tire tracks of a car, analyzing how far the botany must have gone. Ellie and Tomas find some shade and stop to rest. She questions him about how his plane crashed, and he responds that he needed an aircraft without radar so he wouldn't be found, but the engine, being weak, stalled in midair and caused him to crash. Meanwhile, Guillermo continues to follow the footprints, and Gomez also continues with the search. Gomez ends up finding Ellie's car and, looking closely, finds the bodies, which makes him fearful about what may have happened to the botany. He tries to notify and radio for help, but receives no response. Quickly, he gets into his car and follows the trail of another vehicle. Getting no answers over the radio, he decides to proceed and puts on his bulletproof vest. Meanwhile, Guillermo spots the sheriff's car approaching and hides. Gomez sees the car and gets out to look for the vehicle's owner. Finding no one, he climbs a ridge and ends up dropping his ID. He continues looking, but unfortunately he is ambushed. Guillermo shoots him and hits him. Gomez fights back and also hits him in the arm, then he runs, but ends up falling into the holes in the hill. Guillermo, not seeing him anymore, goes back to the sheriff's car and drives a little way, then jumps out of the car. Worried about her father and unable to call him, Alex decides to get on her motorcycle and go in search of him. Ellie and Tomas reach a mountain they have to climb to proceed. So Ellie asks him to untie her so she doesn't fall and die. You take the release and they continue the climb. As night approaches, Alex goes to the sheriff's station to try to communicate by radio, but gets no answers, so he starts searching the desert. Ellie and Tomas reach the top and she ends up helping her kidnapper up. Later, they make camp and start a fire. They talk and introduce themselves. He was a teacher who, when he was younger, learned to fly with his father. Tomas says that since he is unemployed, flying the plane is the only solution. He says his cousin got him a job, however it's for the crime cartel, and with his father very ill in need of expensive treatment, he got involved in it. He asks why she's there, and she tells a little about her life, sadly says that her stepsister who loved her very much asked to take her to school, but she hadn't slept for 3 days, and not wanting to deny the request she decided go. She carelessly ran a red light and in an accident she saw the one she loved die in front of her. With that event, she couldn't stand the loss of living in the old city. She decided to leave and try to forget that guilt. This sensitizes Tomas, but in order not to be in danger, he ties her up so that she doesn't attack him at dawn, then they go to sleep. Alex manages to find his father's car and goes to the place. Getting there he realizes that there is no one, but looking at the tire tracks he goes to where they started. Arriving further up the hill, Alex calls out for her father. She ends up finding Gomez's identification at the bottom of the hill, so she goes up to see if she can find him further up the hill. Alex calls for her father, who is still alive and screams for her. We see that he survived the fall into the hole. He tells her to go away, because he discovered bad and dangerous things, and staying there she runs a great risk of death. Alex doesn't listen to him and says she'll get him out. Still at dawn, Ellie wakes up and uses the knife to cut the ropes, takes a box of matches and water and runs away without Tomas noticing. In the morning, Alex managed to get her dad out, and he started the car, then asked her to go back and let support know where he was going. He thanks her and then goes to continue the search for Ellie. Soon we see her getting as far away from Tomas as possible. She walks through the canyons of the region, and when she was leaving, Guillermo sees her and gets out of the car to pick her up. Afraid, she runs as fast as she can. Later he manages to trick him, but a little later she is surprised by Tomas. Fortunately, he doesn't want to hurt her, so knowing that Guillermo is after her, he lets her keep running. Later, Tomas goes to find Guillermo and says he brought some drugs with him. Before they go back to the car, Tomas pulls the gun on Guillermo, saying that he is fed up with that job and is determined to return to his family. Guillermo says he's family too, and asks if he's going to kill him. Tomas lets his guard down and is killed by his cousin, who soon takes the bags and leaves. Ellie at the exit of the canyon spots Alex's motorcycle and discovers that her friend is looking for her, so she takes a stone and goes back to help Alex, who is now in great danger. We soon see that Alex has been taken hostage, and as Ellie approaches, she is shot in the abdomen, but Alex pushes Guillermo into the cacti and further injures his already injured arm. The two flee, and Ellie is seriously injured. Luckily Gomez arrives at the scene and from the top of the hill shoots Guillermo, who is following them. The two exchange shots, almost hitting each other, as the two get on the bike and drive away. Guillermo runs out of ammo and gets in the car, then chases after the two. Further ahead, with no strength to hold the bike, Ellie ends up falling. Everyone stops and Guillermo takes a gallon of fuel, not allowing Alex to escape, throwing the fuel over her. Meanwhile, Ellie manages to grab another gallon of fuel and throws it on top of Guillermo's drugs, soon setting it on fire. Seeing this, a desperate Guillermo leaves Alex aside and goes to try to put out the flames, but the flames take his clothes and start to burn him too. It doesn't take long for him to fall dead to the ground. Gomez manages to reach the place with her car and happily hugs her daughter, while Ellie looks at a desert flower, relieved to have survived that nightmare.